Former Vice President Dick Cheney died today at the age of 84. And unsurprisingly, the mainstream media today was flooded with whitewashed accounts of Cheney's legacy and outright praise for him. Before we correct the record on who Dick Cheney really was, Cenk, your 2 cents?
So you're not supposed to speak ill of the dead. Yeah, I'm definitely going to violate that in a minute. I have some strong thoughts about this, but I also want to go over his record and think about what's the very worst thing he did. Because boy, I mean, that list is thick with some of the worst crimes in American history. All right, let's find out more.
Well, Cheney reportedly died from complications from pneumonia and cardiac and vascular disease. He's probably best known for being the shadow president to George W. Bush. And for years, he was dubbed Darth Vader for being such a hungry neocon. He's one of the men who lied about Iraq having weapons of mass destruction in order to push America into a war that killed hundreds of thousands of people after 9/11. The Bush-Cheney administration's subsequent war on terror involved everything from warrantless mass wiretapping of American citizens to torture of suspects in US custody who'd never been charged, with anything to the use of unmanned drones to extrajudicially kill people sitting at cafes in places like Pakistan and Yemen based on nothing more than some CIA analysts' unproven suspicion that they were involved with terrorism. He was a vocal cheerleader for torture, which he called, quote, enhanced interrogation. In 2010, he told ABC's Jonathan Karl, "I was a big supporter of waterboarding." Cheney was also instrumental in carrying out the cluster bombing, invasion, and long-term occupation of Afghanistan. By some accounts, the wars he pushed us into ended up killing millions of people, both directly and indirectly. Here's a Washington Post headline from 2023. Post 9/11 wars have contributed to some 4.5 million deaths, report suggests. That includes more than 7,000 American troops that were killed in Iraq and Afghanistan alone. The study also found that the wars displaced over 38 million people. Dick Cheney's approval rating when he left office was 13%, but he was proud of his legacy nonetheless, and even liked that people called him Darth Vader. When a Wall Street Journal reporter visited Wyoming to interview Cheney in 2015, the former vice president showed off his trailer hitch modeled after the supreme commander of the Imperial Fleet. Darth Vader, Cheney said, "I'm rather proud of that." But despite Cheney's documented history of being a war criminal, legacy reporters and establishment politicians lined up today to launder his reputation. Here's how the New York Times described him. A consummate Washington insider, Mr. Cheney was an architect and executor of President Bush's major initiatives, deploying military power to advance the cause of democracy abroad, championing tax cuts and a robust economy at home, and strengthening the powers of a presidency that, as both men saw it, had been unjustifiably restrained by Congress and the courts in the aftermath of the Vietnam War and the Watergate scandal. There's the New York Times parroting the lie that Cheney just wanted to, quote, advance the cause of democracy abroad. They also said that he helped resolve several foreign problems for H.W. Bush. And instead of talking about his real legacy, they recounted his Friday nights at football games and root beer stands as a teenager. At no point did they mention allegations of war crimes, except in this one sentence about the 2024 election, during which Cheney famously endorsed Kamala Harris over Trump. Mr. Cheney and Liz Cheney were engulfed by a parade of Democratic well-wishers, many of whom had once called the former vice president a war criminal. Morning Joe also joined in on the whitewashing and praised him for opposing Donald Trump. Here's Joe Scarborough.
One of these Republicans, that were seen as a defender of democracy when so many others lost their way. Dick Cheney kept his bearings after January the 6th, always kept his bearings. when it came to democratic norms, and he was on the right side. I think most, certainly Republicans from my era, would believe, and I think we all should be grateful to him for that.
Later in the show, author and historian John Meacham called Cheney a remarkable human figure. And we don't make them like this anymore, Meacham said, implying that this is a bad thing. ABC reporter John Carl tweeted, Dick Cheney was a true patriot. On one of the most controversial and consequential political figures of our time, Bill Clinton wrote, throughout his long career in public service, Dick Cheney was guided by a deep belief that he was doing what was right for America. Though we often disagreed, I always respected his dedication to our country and his unwavering sense of duty. My thoughts are with Lynn and the Cheney family. And it goes on, but Cenk, we're getting reports now that Dick Cheney is actually being greeted as a liberator at the gates of hell.
Okay, I'm not laughing, They threw roses at his feet. They literally said that the Iraqis would throw roses at our feet, and that it would only cost 1.7 billion. It cost at least 1,000 times that. Okay, so Dick Cheney, obviously a gigantic liar, and that's part of the reason the establishment loved him. So this is the same treatment that Henry Kissinger got, another war criminal. And so both Democrats and Republicans were like, oh, Henry Kissinger, way to murder all those Cambodians and the Vietnamese. Oh God, you're so great. Oh, but we all knew him. He's so good on the cocktail circuit. You know, Henry Kissinger was actually really funny. Like when we were eating pigs in a blanket and thinking about how many Cambodians he murdered. Oh God, he's such a good guy. And that's how they think about Dick Cheney. To be fair, by the way, the Washington Post did a pretty good obit on Cheney that had all of his downsides. So we always give credit where credit is due, but not earned by the rest of the mainstream media. So now this is the toughest question of all. What is the worst thing about Dick Cheney? This is the thing we probably should have done the poll on today. But go crazy if you want on a live chat poll. But I don't know how you're gonna fit all these things. So I'm gonna do them real quick. Jordan read a lot of them to you with details. So Iraq war, as disastrous as it gets, 5,000 Americans dead because of Dick Cheney, let alone the hundreds of thousands of innocent Iraqis, let alone the trillions of dollars wasted, etc. But hey, to be fair, Israel's #1 enemy was wiped out. So that was really good for America. Anyway, but that's another reason why the establishment loves Dick Cheney, because he's a hardcore Zionist. And they're like, oh, Zionist, all sins are forgiven. Oh, you're for torture, who cares as long as you're a Zionist? So by the way, Dick Cheney, not Jewish, but a Zionist, giant difference. It isn't about religion, it's about like a nationalistic zeal towards one foreign government, usually because the politicians have been bribed, but for whatever reason. Okay, so Iraq war, #2, torture, obviously. #3, warrantless wiretapping. If we just stop right there, he'd already be one of the worst political figures of our lifetime. #4, Gitmo, he tried to get rid of habeas corpus. That is the foundation of Western civilization. He came out against Donald Trump, but what is Donald Trump doing? From time to time, he attacks habeas corpus. And who started that trend? Dick Cheney started that trend. #5, Halliburton. He gave no bid contracts, despised capitalism. The minute the war started, all he did was no bid contracts to all of his friends, including, oh, what a surprise, billions of dollars to the company he used to be the CEO of, and got a $34 million bribe, golden parachute, when he left. And they knew he was gonna be vice president. They're like, here's $34 million. And in return, he gave them billions of dollars, and no other company was allowed to compete for that throughout the entire 8 years they were in office. Absurd. Well, what a corrupt, terrible person. That's why the establishment loves him. As Jordan pointed out, #6, left office with a 13% approval rating. I think at one point he dipped to 9%. The people running Kamala Harris's campaign were maybe a collection of the single dumbest Democrats in the entire country. If you tried to find anybody in the country that was dumber than the people who ran Kamala Harris's campaign, you couldn't do it. They're like, oh, the most unpopular politician of our lifetimes, maybe in history, in the single digits. Why don't you go bear hug him and tell everyone how much you love Dick Cheney? Said the morons, the epic clowns who ran Kamala Harris's campaign. Anyway, #7, shot his friend in the face. We forget that. Like, he's done so many evil things. We're like, well, that was probably a mistake. So I guess we'll give him a pass on that one. But yeah, he shot his friend in the face with a shotgun, because that's Dick Cheney for you. And so, look, that's a murderer's row of disgusting, terrible things that Darth Vader did. And he loved it. He loved being Darth Vader. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm evil. And I get it. I think he was actually closer to the Penguin, right? I've got all that. They want me greater as operators. We don't need a plan. Okay, so now, of course, all of Washington's like, oh, our beloved war criminal. He was such a good man. He murdered brown people in other countries, so that doesn't count at all. But he gave a lot of us bribes and contracts and no bid this and no bid that. And God, we loved his corruption. So go ahead, New York Times, go ahead, CNN, go kiss his ass. He's still sitting there, alive or dead, at around a 9% approval rating. So go tell 90% of the country, you're wrong. The big, powerful elite that spy in on you and torture people and take away all their rights, that's the good guy. All right, then I wonder how mainstream media lost its credibility. That's how.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where this is somebody who lived a long life, got everything they wanted, and never faced any repercussions. You mentioned Kissinger, similar case there. It's frustrating that we see people like this time and time again live long lives while, just to compare it to a domestic issue of gun violence. How many kids are killed every year as a result of gun violence, and how many people like Dick Cheney are obstacles in trying to mitigate, if not eliminate, that problem? And I don't know. I don't know how to think about it. I'm not with the civility police thinking that you shouldn't speak ill of the dead. No, he did this. That's his legacy. His legacy is a terrible one. But the problem with Washington is that it's full of people who are really into the mingling, the symbiotic relationships for them to get ahead, or some professional exchange where you get media appearances or cushy gigs. They all go to the same cocktail parties, and it doesn't matter that this guy helped lie our way into Afghanistan and Iraq, who the death tolls are at the very least in the hundreds of thousands. Doesn't matter that people's lives are upended around the world. It doesn't matter that he did it at the behest of oil companies in which he had a direct financial stake. It doesn't matter that he threw his own daughter under the bus for his vice presidential prospects. None of it. He was nice. He was a real Washington good old boy. When you have media like that, I don't know how you expect anything to change, and you shouldn't. And that's why, again, there's a small element of this where it's important to invest in and support independent outlets, because they're not gonna mislead you. They're not gonna do this whitewashing of a terrible warmonger's legacy in days like this.
Yeah, I forgot that one. Number 8, when his other daughter was gay, and when they asked him, he thought it might hurt the electoral chances of Liz Cheney and maybe himself, and he threw his own daughter under the bus and said she should not have the same rights as straight people. Oh, what a disgusting person. And the fact that Washington doesn't call him disgusting shows you who they really are. That they value their own personal relationships with these horrific figures way more than they value you. And last thing I'm gonna say on it is, Jonathan Karl said, oh, what a true patriot he was. No, he wasn't. Dick Cheney hated the idea of America. That's why he attacked habeas corpus. And they give him all this credit because, he was against what happened on January 6th when Donald Trump seemed to be refusing to step down. Who was in favor of more presidential authority? Dick Cheney was. He's the one that opened that door. He's like, the president should be allowed to do whatever he wants. Torture, getting rid of constitutional rights, getting rid of foundational principles of Western civilization. That's not a patriot. That's a guy who doesn't believe in this country. We don't do torture here, and we're not supposed to spy in on our own citizens. But Dick Cheney never believed in America. He wanted a darker, more sinister version of America. And that's the real reason why I couldn't stand him. So, no, Washington, no. These people are not patriots. They're the exact opposite. And by the way, so are you, because you never actually fight the powerful. You help the powerful lie to us. You aid and abet their war crimes, and you're the people who are charged with, who your job is to do the cover up for all the crimes of the powerful, like Dick Cheney. So again, we're fair. Washington Post had a good obit. You could read that one about Dick Cheney, had all of the complexity. Everything else was trash. Just ass kissing of the powerful, which seems to be mainstream media's top job. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.